The scene begins with a group of high school students who find themselves in an unknown place after their teacher leaves for a while. They discover that their phones don't work, and in front of them is a winged girl who claims to be a goddess. She tells them that they have been summoned to save the fantasy world, and they will soon be taken to the shrine of Fantasia to meet the saint who received the prophecy. The students start asking questions about what they can expect in the fantasy world. One student, Oh Han Woo, asks about levels and skills, while Jiang Mi Yan asks about knights and the medieval aspects. Choi Kang Min wonders if any of them will become real heroes. No, because not everyone is endowed with equal power, and only after receiving the recognition and blessing of the gods, they will be able to become heroes. The class president, Ubora, raises the most important question of when they will return home. The goddess does not have an exact answer to this. She simply says that if in the future heroes defeat the demon lord, then the gods who gave them blessings will fulfill their wishes. However, the students continue to ask questions, but the goddess provides less and less specific information. The main character, Kang Han-soo, finally raises his hand and asks to be sent home, stating that he is not a fighter and has no place in this world. However, the goddess asks why they would turn a blind eye to the world's misfortunes and continue their normal lives. Kang Han-soo responds that he cannot become a hero because he worries about his family. The goddess then announces that anyone who wishes to return home should tell her right away. As a result, the main character is left alone at the portal, and when he enters the portal, he finds himself in an unfamiliar place far from school, near a forest. He hears rustling and discovers huge werewolves who have already feasted on an elf and are now targeting him. Meanwhile, the other classmates end up in the shrine of Fantasia, where they are met the saint, and a swordmaster named Alsus, and Princess Athena, who is an archmage. Ohan immediately started checking the status window before a lot of messages from various gods began to pop up, such as a certain god evaluates heroes, and offering favor to those who they deem worthy. Those who are not favored will not be needed. In this new world, the student's adventure begins. Meanwhile, as Han-soo is running from the monsters, he accessed his status window and discovered a curse called Hero, which automatically translated hostile monsters' languages and reduced his hunting and achievement experience. However, his attempts at communication with the monsters were met with hostility. While running, he heard an unfamiliar language and was suddenly struck by an arrow. A fight broke out between the werewolves and the elves, giving Han-soo an opportunity to escape. But as he crawled away, he realized he was in dire straits and would rather die than pray to the goddess who put him in this situation. At that moment, a boy looked out from behind a tree, invisible to his eyes. A certain god was peeping. God was already openly spying on him, and the guy being on the verge of death tearfully asked to be saved. Windows with inscriptions continued to appear. At first they asked him why he was alone, and not having received a specific answer, they were confused. There were no other gods here. The word outsider came off the tongue, but the boy in the hood did not understand it. Han-soo, who was lying about being a lone wolf running around in a mountainous area, the god likes this term. Han-soo himself is not the same, but lies in order to get help, and it really works. A certain god helped him, the arrow split, and his body felt much better. Next to the blessing, an outsider F appeared, and Han-soo learned that all his stats, except death, would be reset, and terrible things would happen if he left the wilderness. But with his health restored, Han-soo decided to make a run for it. As he fled, the wolves launched a stone at him, causing him to stumble. Despite this setback, he continued on his way until he encountered a cliff. The only way to survive was to jump, risking death either from the fall or from his pursuers. Desperate, Han-soo turned to the monsters and offered them something new. He promised to give his most delicious body parts to whoever caught him first. Immediately, all the werewolves rushed towards him, ready to tear him apart. As they closed in on him, the Han-soo fell backward, hugging their massive bodies and tumbling over them. The force of the collision with the ground was so strong that a column of smoke and dust flew everywhere. Soon, when all this dissipated, Han-soo was breathing heavily, lying on the corpses of monsters. A certain god admired his survival skills, even though the guy himself said that there was nothing special about it. Han-soo barely gets up before he hears one of the werewolves still muttering meat, trying to reach him and stab him with a dagger. Unexpectedly, his status window opens and shows the werewolf's stats, which is at level 3 Blue Moon Butcher. Maybe because of the level, the werewolf remained alive after falling from such a height. Apparently, there will always be enemies stronger than heroes, as in typical MMORPGs. Hansu grabs the stone in his hand, intending to end the life of the werewolf. Meanwhile, in the temple, the saint talks about blessings and levels. If the latter is enough to accumulate experience from killing creatures with status windows, then it is difficult to achieve the former. High school students almost do not listen to her, thinking that having received such power, they will become invincible. But many people get tense when the saint says that the gods will constantly watch them, even in a dream, even in the shower. But there is nothing vulgar about it. Jung Mi-yeon sees it in a more positive way, for which she even receives a blessing charm, F. But a certain goddess does not like that. She begins to use her charm left and right. So Jung Mi-yeon receives a curse punishment, F. The saint says that as soon as a person receives a curse or blessing, it will not disappear until death itself. Also, the higher the rank, the stronger the effect, and once the rank raises, it cannot be lowered. Meanwhile, Hansu takes the weapon from the werewolf, noticing that his level has not risen at all, and God does not give any specifics, so he decides to move on before bumping into the pack again. Hansu decided to attack, and the gods started to pray for his soul. However, Hansu assured them that he wouldn't die. Then, Hansu tied a vine to a stone and swung it in the air. The werewolves had just noticed his presence by this time, while Hansu was about to show the monsters what centrifugal force is. In fact, if he just avoided death, then the blessing would take care of everything else. He managed to deal with all the wolves except for one, and he asked him about where the village is. The werewolf showed him the way, and then asked him to spare him. But after all, Hansu promised that he would just hurt him less, and not spare him. Meanwhile, in the temple, they arranged for a rest, telling the high school students that their training would begin the next day. Alsis would teach swordsmanship, and Athena would teach magic. Oh Han-woo immediately asked if it was possible not to study at all because he was too self-confident. Some immature god pays attention to him. The next morning, everyone was already lined up, waiting for Princess Athena. At the same time, Oh Han-woo received the blessing special, which meant, you are the most special hero in the whole world, and only you can feel this blessing well. Thinking himself special, Oh Han-woo left the temple and went to the city square of the prologue. He immediately went to the Guild of Mercenaries, where he decided to sign up immediately, as it is done in many games of this genre. Then, a red-haired lady approached him, warning that it was very dangerous, and he needed to return home. However, Oh Han-woo thought that this mercenary was some kind of princess in disguise. That's why he decided to catch her, inviting her to his team. The immature main god is dying of laughter. After successfully handling another group of werewolves, Hansu learns that the village is located towards the west. Despite his god's apathy towards his actions, Hansu faces another werewolf and defeats it. During this confrontation, he overhears human voices and soon realizes that they are speaking in an unfamiliar language. The humans notice him, and without comprehending their language, Hansu surrenders by falling to his knees and raising his hands above his head. As they set off together, and Hansu managed to explain his name to them with gestures, but he can't understand anything else from someone else's speech. Despite the fact that it seems that his new acquaintances are friendly to him now, God is not happy with this situation at all because the guy does not behave like an outsider. He also talks to them as if they are close. Hansu just shrugs him off and talks about his own things. He also managed to find out other people's names. The big guy with the beard is called Gary, and he is most likely the leader of this group. He also carries a huge sword behind his back. The young man's name is Cole. He laughs quite often, and is also a two-handed man who owns two swords. Misa is the girl who wanted to shoot him with a crossbow. She is pointing somewhere in the distance smoke, and if it's not from a fire, then it's from someone's houses. God again notices that he is not behaving like an outsider. Then suddenly, werewolves appear from behind who clearly intend to tear up the entire team. Hansu was about to attack, however. He was outpaced by Cole and Gary, who rushed to the attack. Bad or good, everyone starts to protect him, and even he managed to save Misa from strong jaws during one of the attacks. It seemed that an easy victory was at hand. But for some reason, the group is not particularly happy about it. Despite the protection provided to her, the girl directs her crossbow directly into Hansu's chest and shoots where the heart is. The world disappears before his eyes. The men and the girl are talking about how they considered the kid dangerous, especially when he took out a dagger. But now he can't even be sold into slavery, so they'll just have to sell everything he has. Misa reports that she did not hit the heart, so Cole needs to be more careful. Cole raises one of his swords, ready to deliver the last blow, but abruptly freezes when Hansu's status window pops up in front of him. There are only two reasons for this phenomenon. Either Hansu shared it himself, or he has a special blessing. It is logical that, under such circumstances, the target should be alive. Hansu rises with a sharp movement and cuts the swordsman's throat. In the same way, he kills Gary, however. He is shot again by Misa, but that doesn't stop him as he kills Misa despite her begging for forgiveness. Then he takes off her uniform and puts it on himself while God laughs and says that he respects Hansu's weird hobby, to which he replies that it's not a hobby. It was just the only armor that suited him. Afterwards, he manages to see Misa's status window. She also had a blessing, but the girl was not a hero. Apparently this was a very common phenomenon. Hansu decides to continue on to the village. The good thing is that the dead carried a bag of coins with them. Meanwhile, magic training is taking place in the temple. Athena claims that talent is really important in magic, which is determined by pedigree and acquired academic connections. However, she also says that it is still possible for a person who has neither one nor the other to become a magician. Since Yubora asked this question, the princess decides to make her her first student and asks her to take an oath using magic. Due to the fact that they have made such a connection, Yubora gets a blessing of rank C. If you don't have parents or a teacher with the blessing of magic, then you won't be able to become a wizard. The lesson continues with the princess using ordinary magic, which is called white magic. There is also black magic that she used without a blessing or talent, which burned her hands. If someone wants to achieve it, then they will have to use their body as fuel. Meanwhile, Hansu gets to the village. Fortunately, he manages to reach the tavern by bribing the guard and enters an inn where he takes a shower. As he is taking a shower, he hears someone talking, which he is able to understand judging by his curse. This is a representative of a hostile race. Hansu gets dressed and grabs his dagger, but he decides to open the door and hide the weapon since he wants a meaningful conversation. A man, who appeared ordinary, introduced himself as the village chief. He checked in after hearing that there was someone who didn't understand their language. The man could also see Hansu's status and advised him to hide it, surprising Hansu. The chief thought Hansu was an elf, but was wrong. The village had been invaded by werewolves who lost their home to greedy fairies, causing many to lose their families. The village was a fort built by those seeking revenge. A certain god for some reason looks very upset. The man asks his last question, why didn't the paralytic drug affect the boy hearing this? Hansu immediately grabs his dagger, pressing the blade to someone else's throat with a sharp movement, but his hand cramps it is useless to resist. Hansu finds himself tied up in an underground basement where the village chief is angry at the elves who are tied up by their legs to the ceiling. He then asks Hansu to look at his status window, in which his name is Crimson, and not only does he have the blessing of madness, but also the curse of elves. The curse says that the village chief has become their enemy, and his lifespan has been shortened. That's why it becomes more difficult to kill the enemy, especially since he is a black magician, and in order to prolong his life, he needs to sacrifice someone. So he decided to sacrifice Hansu, and promises him to sacrifice him without any pain. Hansu calls out to the village chief, to which he responds with pleasure, rejoicing that Hansu does not start begging for his life. While the village chief is distracted by whipping the still-living elves in bags to death, his actions are completely immoral. So, Hansu decides to take him by trickery. He talks about how he understands what it's like to walk down a path that no one can recognize. The village chief is delighted that now he himself apparently has become an outsider, which means that he should become the only wolf. Actually, that's right. The lunatic still wants to kill him. However, after that, for some reason, the village chief becomes more supportive of him and chooses some elf whom he throws off with chains on a circle for sacrifices. Apparently, Hansu will stay alive. In order to sacrifice, he needs the consent of the victim, which he receives from the fact that they promise the unfortunate elf that he will let his friend go after the ritual. Hansu realizes that for some reason, the village chief is not getting any younger, to which he receives an answer that the village chief in front of him is not a person at all. He says that when he was human, because of the curse, he immediately became sick and old. And if then, a wandering magician who proposed an experiment that makes him half human, half werewolf, a hybrid of those who have a grudge against the blonde-eared creatures, and it seems that this is condescension, because the village chief puts his palm on Hansu's shoulder and says that today is the most wonderful day, and he was finally able to know who he is. And then he adds that he uses the life of Hansu properly. Meanwhile, in the temple, we are shown the formation of Princess Athena. She was called the genius of the magic kingdom of archmages, and she herself has always admired hard-working people. Being a princess took up most of her time, but thanks to her talent, she didn't have to put much effort into it. And despite the fact that Yu Bo-ra heard explanations about the academic connection and pedigree, she still wanted to learn the whole skill on her own. That's why the princess chose her as her first student. Later, she explains to Yu Bo-ra that if she wants to strengthen her magic, then she should imitate the magic of her teacher. Thanks to the patronage, the royal family inherited some of the talents of their ancestors. It is because of this that they have been able to use outstanding flame magic for many generations. However, she can also use ice magic and create something out of ice on her own. Then, Zhang Mi-yan raises the question of how to use magic for those who do not have a blessing. A real hum arises during which the princess asks who will become her second student. Naturally, everyone is torn, which is why a more or less friendly class becomes enemies who will fight for a place. After that, she continues the lesson, saying that you can acquire your own magic through training and practice. Yu Bo-ra asks if white magic and black magic are similar, to which the princess warns her, saying that black magic requires sacrifices during each use, and it is impossible to master it. Meanwhile, in the village, Hansu sits in the sacrificial circle before the village chief asks for his consent. "We need to act quickly, otherwise life will really end here," he says. Hansu asks the village chief about his last wish to see Misa for the last time. Hansu lies that he is the boyfriend of Misa, the girl he killed earlier, but the village chief doesn't really believe him because he knows that Misa's boyfriend is Cole. Fortunately, Hansu again manages to get out by saying that he is her ex. And if the village chief still does not believe him, then let him sniff. And really, he smells like Misa, so he's not lying. Does he have any other desires? Hansu asks him to let him go free if he can survive the ritual, and it would seem that they made a deal. But the village chief is so evil that he takes it as consent, which means that he can start the sacrifice. During the ritual, Hansu's entire body hurts, but due to his outsider's blessing, he manages to break free from the ropes and strike the village chief in the face. The village chief is shocked that Hansu not only managed to deceive him, but also survived the ritual. The outsider's blessing removed all the effects and even restored his shortened lifespan. But now the village chief has to fulfill his part of the deal. Hansu grabs a dagger and examines the bound elves. He frees the blue-haired elf and throws her over his shoulder, rushing to the door while the village chief is still surprised. However, he soon tries to nullify his promise by releasing the lifespan he received from Hansu. He is just about to use his black magic when he abruptly chokes on his own blood and begins to age. What kind of status does this guy have? Who is he anyway? Hansu pulls out his dagger, shouting that he is an outsider's apostle, while a certain god tells him not to put on airs, and then he himself is embarrassed. Hansu thoughts if he kills the village chief, who is level 13, he might finally be able to raise his level. But it's better to think about escaping. Just as Hansu turns around, he hears the words about revenge, and the village chief's human body dies. Then the werewolf's head comes out. The village chief rushes at him, inflicting, as it seemed to him, a fatal blow to Hansu's chest and heart area. However, Hansu recovers quickly with the help of his outsider's blessing, and manages to kill him with the help of the blue-haired girl who grabs the village chief's leg and blocks his way with her shackles. Before his death, the werewolf only plaintively apologizes to his daughter for not being able to take revenge. Afterwards, Hansu releases all the prisoners, even calls the guards, and it seems that everything is over until soon. The elves are still not positive towards him, and fire at him as he runs away. Meanwhile, in the temple, new magicians began to appear in the temple who wanted to receive the title of mentor for the hero they train. When Princess Athena talked about how to create a fireball and was asked again if mathematical formulas were needed, she refused. However, other archmages who pulled up refuted her answer, saying that it is important to know all sorts of factors that can somehow affect the outcome of events and magic itself. Meanwhile, we are shown a village where Esopresso, the servant of the elf princess, is being treated. She and everyone else also escape from the village chief's grasp after being rescued. Her friend comes to her and says that they have lost track of the boy. It turns out that they attacked him because of a dagger with a royal emblem, which makes the maid very angry. She even calls all people ordinary animals. The blue-haired elf whom Hansu saved comes into the room. Her name is Celebliss. She is a councilwoman, and she also possesses the royal blood flow because of her eternal life. She became the elder's toy and stayed in the basement the longest. On the contrary, she is even grateful to the person for saving them. However, the maid still does not trust Hansu and says that he might be after her eternal life. But Celebliss informs her that if Hansu used a breach of contact, if it is terminated, everyone should pay the same price. However, the village chief underestimated the life force of Hansu and self-destructed, saying he does not need her eternal life force, and leaves the room, saying she'll find him. As she left, it is shown that a certain god was spying and listening to everything, and immediately returns to Hansu and asks if he's alive, which he is. However, he's stuck in the foliage of a tree. Meanwhile, Prince Alsus leads the students who want to learn swordsmanship to the banquet hall, where there is a huge table with drinks and treats. However, he is not very happy with the fact that the guys think of swordsmanship only as some kind of ignorant fight. So he asks the captain of the knights to arrange a sparring that takes place between him and Alsus. The first match resulted in Alsus's defeat as he was holding back. Then, after being treated, he asks the knight commander to use all his might, as he will show what true swordsmanship is. Then both of them fill their swords with mana, and face off in a duel in which the knight commander's sword simply breaks in half, resulting in Alsus's victory. Then Alsus tells the students that the power to cut through the opponent in one strike is swordsmanship. Meanwhile, Hansu was killing more werewolves. He noticed that it had become easier to kill them, and his body seemed to have become more nimble than before. He thought that his level might have gone up, but it didn't. He was still level 1. Then, he offered to negotiate with the surviving werewolf. That if he tells him how the werewolves used their swordsmanship like the village chief, Hansu would give him elven meat. The werewolf agreed, and answered that they ate lots of meat to gain power. However, Hansu didn't understand the power of meat, so he decided to explore the werewolves' ecosystem for his smooth revenge.